The head of Smartmatic admits that voting machine fraud can flip elections.
Mr. Reagan.
So Antonio Mujica, I think that's how you pronounce his name, explained in 2007 that election fraud was committed in Venezuela using his machines. He is the head of a company called Smartmatic, and that is a company at the center of many allegations here in the United States. Smartmatic was tied to Dominion voting machines, and this is one of the biggest voting machine suppliers in the country, but Dominion insists that it actually doesn't use Smartmatic software, and the criticisms of Smartmatic should not be applied to Dominion. But here's the thing. The problem that Antonio Mujica discusses in the video I'm about to show you, it's not merely true of Smartmatic, it's true of every voting machine. Let's watch the video.
We estimate the difference between the actual participation and the one announced by the authorities is at least 1 million votes. It is important to point out that this would not have occurred if the auditors of all political parties have been present at every stage of the election.
So a lot of people on the left, they don't want you to think about voting fraud. They don't want you to look into voting fraud. They don't want you to imagine that it's even possible. As we all know, Twitter has put a little disclaimer against any tweet that talks about voting fraud. It says, this claim is disputed. And it doesn't matter what you write about. If you have a blue check and you write about voter fraud, it will give that disclaimer. And it says, you know, voter fraud is very rare. Voter fraud is very rare. Maybe it has been in the past, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's rare this year. According to this guy who, you know, this is his company, right? He makes these voting machines. He's admitting in this video that in fact, because of his machines, there was enough voter fraud committed using his machines in order to flip the election in Venezuela. I believe this was an election of, you know, parliamentarians, right? So one party was able to defraud the voters, right? They were able to compromise the election by using voting machines. And look, we all know voting machines aren't as, you know, as safe as just hand counted votes. People, you know, write out their vote on a printed piece of paper, give it to the vote counters, and then they count them, right? And then you have vote watchers, which were supposed to exist in Pennsylvania, but you know, they were pushed out of the rooms in some cases, stuff like that. But if the system is going correctly and both parties are there to witness what's happening, everything's transparent, then hand counted votes are the best way to go. We don't do that in most places in America. We have the voting machines to count the votes and all that kind of stuff. These cause numerous problems that we are now trying to sort out. We're now trying to analyze all of this and see what really happened in the 2020 election, because there are so many red flags, right? There's all these red flags, and I'm going to talk about this in a variety of videos in the next couple of days. There are so many red flags that these things need to be looked at. There was obviously a press conference with Rudy Giuliani the other day, and he pointed out huge red flags in Pennsylvania. And in fact, the evidence was so compelling that everybody who was listening in on that particular press conference let out an audible gasp.
Can you calculate how much of a vote that accounted for Biden and how much for Trump?
Close to 600,000. I think our figures were about 570 some odd thousand that all those spikes represent over time.
For Biden?
Correct.
And how much for Trump?
I think it was a little over 3,200.
How about that?
And that's just one thing, right? That's just one statistical anomaly that shows voter fraud. I'm going to be presenting you guys with a lot of other anomalies, a lot of other strange things that are going on that indicate, yes, voter fraud did exist. And this guy who heads up Smartmatic admits his machines can be used this way, in this nefarious way. All right, now this has been said a million times, and I'm going to say it again. The winner of any election should want any claim of voter fraud investigated and proven untrue, right? And that's because you need to instill in everyone who voted for you or didn't vote for you a sense of confidence. that the vote was fair, that their vote was counted. And that's been true. That's true all over the world, right? Every leader should want his people to believe, his or her people, to believe that the vote was fair, that their vote counted, and either they were merely in the minority or that, they were in fact in the majority and, what they wanted did occur in a fair and just way. The way it is right now, if Biden actually takes office, which I'm not sure one way or another how that's going to go, but if he does take office, 50% of the country will never actually accept him as president. We won't believe that he legitimately won this election. He's got to prove to us that voter fraud doesn't exist. And a lot of people are saying, well, you can't prove a negative, right? You can't prove a negative. A lot of Democrats are saying this kind of thing. You're investigating something that doesn't exist. That's the whole point of an investigation, right? Is to show whether or not something happened, something existed. There was, this person's guilty or this person's innocent, right? It's to show that. And so if you don't have any evidence or don't have any hard evidence, but there's a claim, right, by serious people, by very many people, or there is some kind of red flag, there's some kind of anomaly that draws people's attention, that makes people think, well, maybe something bad here did happen, that's when an investigation needs to be initiated. Who should be conducting that investigation? Right now, it just seems like it's a handful of lawyers. I think it should be the FBI. Right? The Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? It's in the title. That's their job, to investigate these kinds of bizarre things that happen on a federal level. This was a federal election. The Federal Bureau of Investigation should be investigating it. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if any investigations are occurring. I don't know if they're even looking at this kind of stuff. We saw through the last 4 years that there are many federal agents, FBI agents, who have wanted Trump out of office and have been cooperating with Democrats against conservatives. And, we know that the IRS conspired against conservatives with the Obama administration. Who knows how many people in there are corrupt, compromised. I'm going to make another video sort of about that same thing, so I won't get into that too much here. But the truth is that we all know, based on all of the red flags that we've seen, that it's very, very likely there was voter fraud. The idea that this election was free from, and I'm not talking about just like occasional voter fraud, like the idea that this election was completely clean and free from fraud in any significant way is just, that's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous notion. And the Democrats who say that, they're being disingenuous. Either they just don't want to believe it, or they are seriously afraid of being caught out and Trump taking office. So they'd rather just not investigate, right? Don't. What are you looking over here for? Don't look at that. Biden won. Pay no attention to this over here. But as we all know, that's nonsense. And, everybody has to feel confident, that their president was elected rightfully. And at the moment, no conservatives, very few conservatives are confident about that. All right, well, that's it for me. I will see you guys next time.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.